Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
And Adam Perry.
Scared for Reels. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, all of that, because I always forget to plug it at the beginning, Adam.
Good job, Chris.
Yeah. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. As soon as you log into your YouTube account, you'll get the notification that we have a new episode up there for you to listen to. So we're doing this series within a series. The years that we were born, there were some great movies, some of our favorite movies. One of my favorite movies of all time we're not going to talk about because it's not really a horror or cult film, Raging Bull, and Adam's picked on me many times. Adam was born in 1987. I was born in 1980, so we did Lost Boys last time. We appreciate everyone reaching out and commenting on the Lost Boys episode. It was cool. They actually disagreed with me, Adam, which I invite. If we all had the same beliefs, the same opinions, it would be a pretty boring world, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
So we appreciate it, whether you just want to comment, give us thanks, or if you want to argue, debate with us. Hey, that's the love of movies, because everyone sees something differently. And that's the cool thing about movies. Art is subjective. Last week we did 1987, so let's go back to 1980. One of two masterful ghost stories that came out in 1980. We're going to save The Shining for later, so that means we're going to talk about The Changeling. To say it's a classic is understated, and it's based on a true story as well. About the Cheeseman Park murders or something like that. But yeah, there were some real bizarre things. It's actually based on a real musician, a real composer who wanted to get away from the Northeast and live in Colorado. And he, rents out, or he gets into this rental situation, and he starts hearing all sorts of noises, balls bouncing. And it's like 6 a.m. He would hear weird sounds in the house. Lo and behold, they made a movie with bouncing balls, scary sounds. And obviously people will think, oh my gosh, The Haunting. It's impossible not to compare and see different, similarities between those two movies, even though they're completely different storylines. I mean, The Haunting is really cool, and the sound design and everything like that. You can't do a haunted house movie now and not be influenced by The Haunting.
Sure.
I mean, it was like the first of its kind, like we've talked about, Psycho, Peeping Tom, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, making the horror movies crawl before they walk and then run.
Yep.
So The Changeling is just a 1980 film, and it didn't make like a ton of money. It doubled its budget, which was kind of cool. I mean, considering the subject matter, this is not an easy film to just sit and, like, when you're in a good mood, you want to sit down and I want to watch a happy or like a fun horror movie, because this is not like a fun movie.
Yeah.
And it's very serious subject matter. I mean, again, based on the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion in Cheeseman Park in Denver. And actually, Russell Hunter served as a co-writer of the movie as well. I probably should note that. That's kind of important. But yeah, I mean, it premiered in March of 1980, and I mean, a lot of it was filmed in Canada. Obviously, less
Everything's
expensive.
filmed in Canada.
Well, this kind of started, in this era, this movie, amongst others, really started, sending American filmmakers and filmmakers all over the world to Canada, because it was less expensive to shoot there.
Yeah, North Carolina and Canada.
Right.
There's
Yeah, Last Mohicans I can think of off the top of my head, even though that was the story itself took place in the Northeast. It's filmed in the Carolinas, you know. But, John Russell is, I love how they're, Russell Hunter, John Russell. So there's some similarities in the character names. His story, George C. Scott. Let's talk about him for a minute, because this is one of his
powerhouse,
one of his best performances. I mean, going from Dr. Strangelove to Patton, and then The Changeling. I mean, again, The Changeling, he has some dynamic scenes, but compared to Patton, he's very subdued.
Very subtle.
Yeah, very subtle. A lot more subtle role than we're used to with George C. Scott. Again, I loved how Kubrick had him act like a child with his character, because his character was kind of childish in Dr. Strangelove. But hey, you get the hustler where he's yelling some of the movie. Yeah. And he has a couple of scenes where he does that, but for the most part, it's a very reserved inner performance for George C. Scott.
I mean, he's also, playing really well a grieving widower now, and after losing his wife and daughter.
Yeah, that's the thing. The movie starts off, I mean, something bad's going to happen. There's some tension, especially when he leaves. I'll be back in a minute, and you know how that works in a horror movie.
Right.
But and by the way, his wife, do you remember Willow?
Yes.
She played Queen Bavmorda in Willow.
Oh, very cool.
So, and yeah, you get to see a glimpse of her not playing an evil character, which is like, oh my God, that's Queen Bavmorda from Willow.
Right.
But the movie just starts off with literally not a bang, but it was like, wow, what a way to start off a movie.
Yeah.
And that just kind of prepares you for how the rest of the movie is going to be. Mm-hmm. Dealing with trauma, dealing with tragedy, how to grieve. There's a lot of that stuff in there. I don't know if post-traumatic stress is part of it, but definitely grieving and trauma. I mean,
I'm sure there's post-traumatic stress involved, even though we didn't really call it that back in the 80s.
But that's the thing, like, to escape, he tries to escape into his work.
Yep.
He moves to this reclusive place in Colorado, just like...
What's with ghost stories in Colorado?
I know. I know. There's a few of them, isn't there?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I don't know. That's all I was going to say. It's like...
Yeah, so I mean, the movie literally starts off with a gut punch, and it quietly kind of builds back up in there because he moves into this house the Historical Society has, somehow lent him, and he's hoping that he can compose music. He becomes a music teacher out there. So, I mean, it's a humongous house, and that's the thing, like. You look at there's different shots of the exterior of the house. It's not the same house because, again, expensive to shoot inside of like a real house. So the set designer just created this amazing set for the interior. You want to talk about a spacious home, right?
Absolutely.
So it's just amazing how you don't really think of it as a fake movie house, but that's just the props to the set people that actually did it.
Movie magic
at its best, that's for sure. I'm just trying to find, I can't remember the guy's name who was in charge of the sets, but I mean, that guy just did such an amazing house. But yeah, the house seen in the movie in real life doesn't and never actually did exist, because I'm looking at the cost. $200,000. That's how much it would have cost.
Oh wow!
To like literally use that suitable like a suitable mansion, so they could make the movie. $200,000. So the production had a Victorian Gothic mansion facade attached to the front of a much more modern dwelling. It was on Vancouver Street, apparently. Now, the construction was used for the filming of all exteriors of the movie's Carmichael Mansion, and the interiors of the haunted house was an elaborate group of interconnecting sets built inside a film studio. So that's pretty cool. I mean, we think of Universal Studios being a prominent movie place, but Vancouver apparently has some lavish sets.
So many movies and TV shows are set in Vancouver. I'm not surprised.
Right.
But again, like I was saying, like North Carolina and Georgia, they have just as many sets as Hollywood, and there's tax credit to shoot out there. So it's smart.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, the big mansion, they've actually used it for the X-Men movies. I'm
sure they
X-Men and that's the big one off the top of my head. So, but yeah, it's quite the amazing. Well, that the exterior, exterior shots, but the actual set itself with inside, it's just made for that movie.
Yeah,
and it looked like it's one of those things where you think big, but it was actually probably cost a lot less than we think. It doesn't say how much all of that cost, but just the fact that it would have cost $200,000 just to shoot inside of a mansion.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet. And very ingenious set designs, that's for sure, in this movie.
Talented people working on this movie.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So, yeah, we were talking about John Russell. George C. Scott plays John Russell, this composer, dealing with a family tragedy. I mean, geez, losing his wife and daughter. I mean, how do you recover from that? And that's what the film kind of shows you. He does struggle with it, because when he moves into the house, some things happen. There's a ball that comes flying at him, and he catches it. It comes bouncing at him, and he catches it. Even the maid was like kind of freaked out by that. Mm-hmm. It just comes out of nowhere as he's moving in.
Yeah.
So like, boom, as soon as he enters the house, he literally gets bombarded with a bouncing ball. And that's what happened to the real life guy. He kept seeing a bouncing ball.
Wow.
And it would literally come down the stairs at him. Talk about freaky.
Yeah.
In real life. It's one thing seeing it, it's a movie, mm-hmm. but in real life, if you actually saw a bouncing ball coming at you, it's like, all right, who's pulling a prank? And there's no one else in the house. So what the heck is happening here?
Yeah, it's definitely creepy.
I mean, sure. I'm kind of, I believe in ghosts, but not to the extent as other people do. So it's like, so in real life, this guy literally has a seance just like in the movie. And unlike the movie, in real life, apparently he literally had a priest exorcise the house.
Oh, wow.
And that didn't work. No. The banging and the clanging and the bouncing balls stopped, but then the piano starts playing by itself, just like it does in the movie.
Right.
But it's just amazing, like based on a true story, and this stuff really did happen. Mm-hmm. We've heard that term based on a true story, and how much of it is real.
Right.
But as we were discussing, I mean, this movie's been out for 44 years. We really don't need a spoiler alert, but the people who actually killed the child, well, they don't even know if they actually killed the child. It's a big mystery. Mm-hmm. They haven't really solved 100% of it, but they found the remains of the child on a different site, just like they did in the movie. I mean, the composer guy just, heck with this, I'm out of here, and he moved away, and the house burnt itself down just like it does in the movie. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, you don't get the feeling of resolution in real life, and that's real life. It doesn't always work out
right
like a movie where everything gets solved in an hour 45 2-hour running time. It's
right.
It's just the sad state of affairs. Mm-hmm. But another thing to keep in mind, and I'm sure you probably thought some of the same things that were going on, 1980, a few years after Watergate, corrupt politician, a guy literally buried evidence, and he didn't know. That's the thing. He didn't know his father killed his real son and used him as like a changeling.
Right.
And the great Oscar-winning actor Melvin Douglas, in one of his final roles, he's terrific. Mm-hmm. And he's the changeling in the movie. He's the title character. He's an established senator, and I think they used the whole politician angle, because I think in real life the changeling was some sort of high-profile businessman. He may have been a politician itself. There's been some historians talking about the Cheeseman Park mystery, and that's the thing. Cheeseman Park itself, I think, was like a cemetery at one point.
Okay.
And then they made it into a park, and there was a lot of controversy about, the bodies. There's still some bodies buried there. So
you put something on top of an ancient Indian burial ground, and we
that's The Shining. This The Shining. Well, The Shining.
Poltergeist.
The Shining alluded to and we'll talk about The Shining later on. But yeah, the head guy of the hotel says it was a Native American burial ground. But there's like 20,000, or I can't remember the amount of bodies, but it was in the 5-figure bodies, okay? And they put a call out to residents saying, hey, we're going to be building a park here. You need to make arrangements to get your family members out of the ground. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a little more twisted and macabre.
Yeah.
But, they had to find a different place for their family members, but there were still, they say, between 2,000 and 5,000 bodies still buried in Cheeseman Park.
Wow.
And there's a lot of different things about the mansion. After it burnt down, they built this big business building, and people say that, or there's like an apartment complex / business building, and that people can hear piano playing, some music playing. There's no one that lives there, though. Huh.
Interesting.
So it's like the ghost, you can't kill a ghost, really.
Right.
You can make the ghost rest at ease, I guess, according to the movies. But in real life, ghosts are still a mystery. I guess that's why we're so fascinated with it.
Well, I mean, it's, I call myself an open-minded skeptic when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. If you're going to tell me that, a bunch of wild stories and say that place is haunted, I'll entertain you. But I'm the type of person, like, I want to see proof. And if I see proof that can't be explained, I'll give you the point for that.
And the Changeling kind of alludes to that a little bit, because a psychologist suggests to George C. Scott to find one of those supernatural people to try to do a seance, and
a medium,
a medium, and he goes 9 times out of 10 they're fake.
Yeah,
but it's that one that you need to find. So luckily in the movie he finds it. Plus running time. You can't be spending a whole movie trying to find a good
medium,
right?
Yeah. But again, the whole ghost discussion, it's a fascinating one. There's actually written by Dan Aykroyd's father, because the Aykroyds have a lineage in ghost hunting. This is where all the Ghostbusters lingo and technology comes from.
Well, he co-wrote Ghostbusters, the script.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the reason why it's so technically, when you hear them talk about ectoplasm and the technology to catch ghosts and the lore behind ghosts, this is 3 generations of Aykroyd mediums and ghost hunters. There's a fascinating book that his father wrote called The History of Ghosts, mm-hmm. and it traces ghost hunting back to its origins. And there really is, there is scientific evidence that when we die, we leave something behind. So that's a fact. We leave an energy force. We leave something behind, and it's been scientifically proven that we emit something as we die. So, like I said, the whole ghost idea and phenomena is a fascinating one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before they even let's get back to the Changeling, before he even discovers that a rich guy trying to keep his inheritance, because a crippled kid wasn't going to keep the family lineage going. So and you see the scene where he drowns his own son. It's like, how could you do that?
Yeah, it's tough watch.
It's one thing to switch out that's twisted enough. Switching it out, making him believe the boy made a full recovery like years later, right? And it's actually someone he adopted. It's not even real blood,
right?
So in reality, the bloodline has stopped.
Right.
It's not his real son. So it's like keeping this weird illusion alive just for greed.
Yep.
It's crazy. But that before they even discover that, but like a few years afterwards, the family who bought the house, their young girl was killed by a coal cart. So George C. Scott thinks, I think the ghost is the little girl trying to connect with me because I lost my little girl. So he thinks there's some sort of connection. And we, the audience, kind of think so too. But, if you look at the running, there's still a lot of running time left to this movie. It can't solve the... Mm-hmm. And then when the seance happens, he finds out, no, it's not a little girl. It's a little boy, a paraplegic boy, who just gets killed by his own dad.
Yeah.
Ugh. So twisted.
Yeah.
And not only that, just burying it in a well.
Yeah.
And again, you don't see the gore. You kind of see the child struggling and drowning. Mm-hmm. But, this is a horror movie. Again, the best horror movies, they don't show a lot of gore.
Right.
It's all eluded. And I think this movie does it perfectly because you don't really see any blood or gore. I think there might be a couple quick scenes of blood, and that's it. It's very quick.
Yeah.
So it's just such a there's a lot of There's political corruption, because Watergate happened a few years before this movie came out, so it's still fresh in people's minds. So you had the political aspect of it. You had the ghost story part of it. And again, I know there are scenes that kind of freak people out, but there are some just the whole thought that this actually happened is more horrifying than the movie itself.
Sure.
And it's just coming to terms with dealing with grief and dealing with trauma and everything like that. It's just such a great film for that. How do you move on? I think that's a good question. Even George C. Scott trying to bury himself in his work. I mean, of course, he's got a child ghost haunting him, using his deceased daughter's ball as a way to try to communicate with him.
Right.
And that's actually the perfect guy to communicate with, So it's a movie that still fascinates. I mean, we're still talking about it 44 years later.
Yeah. It has so much you can chew on, so many emotions. And like you said, how do you move on from such a tragedy like that? Do you ever move on?
No, I don't know how anyone, I just don't know how anyone can move on from that.
Yeah. It takes a lot of inner strength for sure to carry on after something like that. So it's, you're tormented for the rest of your life regardless.
Right. So let's talk about Peter Medak, the guy who actually directed The Changeling. He was born in Hungary. His family was Jewish. In 1956, he actually fled Hungary for the United Kingdom because of the Hungarian uprising. It was the whole, I think there was a lot of communism involved in that. I don't want to get too much involved, but basically the Hungarian uprising, a huge countrywide revolution against the government of the Hungarian People's Republic, which, 1949 to 1989, that's a long time.
Yep.
And the policies caused by the government's subordination to the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of political stuff in there. But he left this country because of that. He embarked on a career in the film industry. He started as a trainee, and then he rose to the position of film director. And I got to tell you, if you are you into like satire? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a dark comedy he did 8 years before The Changeling came out called The Ruling Class.
Yeah, with
Peter O'Toole, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's a little lengthy. It's like 2.5 hours, but I mean, Peter O'Toole, even though he was in some duds, never had a bad performance. This is one of his best roles.
Oh, wow.
It's like literally 10 years after he did Lawrence of Arabia, and he, it has a lot to say about the upper class, and they have weird things.
Yeah.
And you got to watch the movie. I mean, the Ruling Class is just one of the best dark comedies. It's some of it's very twisted, but
yeah,
if you got a dark sense of humor, like I do to a certain degree, the movie does have its charm. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Peter Medak. I mean, the only other movie I've seen of his is The Changeling. But I did see Romeo is Bleeding. It's one of those neo-noir, that craze that started in the they say Blade Runner's neo-noir, but in the 90s, there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
And Romeo's Bleeding, you have Gary Oldman, Lena Olin. I don't know if you remember her from the Alias TV series. She was the mom in that. It's like a psychosexual cat and mouse thriller. Mm-hmm. I guess kind of neo-noir-ish. Neo-noir to me is like just like a blanket term, but I don't want to get into that discussion right now. But yeah, The Changeling is just, there's just so much. To me, it feels like a simple storyline, but there's just a lot of subtle subtext beneath the layer. It's a movie that has a lot of layers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And home video, it's got quite the home video history too. So, Adam, I got to ask, before we talk about the home video stuff, when did you first discover The Changeling?
I honestly can't remember.
It obviously came out several years before you were born.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, again, probably mid-teen somewhere. I I really can't remember, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like it seems like most of these movies, go back to my early 20s. Mm-hmm. I was aware of it. I saw it a couple times, and and it's just George C. Scott, man. I mean, his performance is just so powerful, and and the music score too. We shouldn't be ignoring the fact that the music plays a huge role. Rick Wilkins, he's still around. He's almost, I think he's like 87 now. But he's a Canadian composer, conductor, tenor saxophonist. So he hasn't done too much in film and stuff, but obviously The Changeling is one of the things, I mean, the guy will always be known for. I mean, the score, you got some melancholy, you got some eerie sounds to it, and I mean, it's just it's just like the movie, the emotions kind of run rampant, and the score is like a character in itself.
Yeah. Like
it's like a narrator. I mean, the score is like the narrator in a way for the movie.
Yeah,
and and like the cool thing is there was a couple of 4K editions that came out a few years ago now. Severin Films had one, and Second Sight had one, and in their limited editions, they actually include the CD soundtrack.
Oh wow,
which is kind of cool. You get the whole score.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie I can't recommend enough, and I know we're kind of going all over the place with it, but I mean, it's just there's so much to really talk about when it comes to The Changeling, and some personal stuff happened on the set because Trish Van Devere, I think that's how you say her name, and George C. Scott were actually married to each other in real life.
Wow.
It makes their chemistry so good. They were actually married.
Yeah.
Publicity for this picture stated they had worked together 7 times in their then 8 years of marriage. They had been together in 6 movies and 1 stage play. So, I mean, they had a good rapport together.
Yeah.
And, just some interesting stuff. The screenwriters spent about 6 months doing research for the movie, which included like newspaper articles on parapsychological encounters. I guess there were over 700 books and 2,000 case histories. This is like 1980, so it just probably like quadruple that now, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So
sure.
Have you ever? So I know you're kind of skeptical about ghosts, and I am to a certain degree. I mean, do you know anyone that's had like a legit ghost encounter?
Yeah, apparently I did when I was 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Why don't you explain what you...
All right, so my father's side, my grandfather died a month before I was born.
Gotcha.
All right, and we lived, before my brother had come along, we lived in Ballston Spa, and we shared the house with my grandmother.
Okay.
All right. My grandmother and my father were at work, and there was an upstairs master bedroom where my grandmother and my grandfather had, were. I was 2 or 3 years old. I wandered upstairs. Mm-hmm. My mom couldn't find me, and when she did, I asked her who the man upstairs was. And of course, my mom totally lost it, and thinking that there was someone in the house. Called my dad. My dad and my grandmother come home. And they sat me down and asked me who there was no one in the house. They checked the house. Asked me who I saw up in the upstairs room, and apparently I described my grandfather Lambert to a T.
Wow.
And I mean, and at that age,
you're only 3,
2 or 3, so you can't really comprehend pictures. You don't really know what And so, yeah, they always kind of chalk that up that Grandpa was looking over me that day. Was keeping an eye on me.
That was the only time you saw your grandfather?
That was the only time I apparently... Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, he would... I mean, I was at his funeral as an infant.
Right.
But
you had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, he died a month before I was born.
Wow.
So... that's my horse, my ghost story, and I wasn't even really understanding what was going on.
Right. I mean, 2 or 3 seeing.
And to be, and my dad tells me it was scary how detailed I described my grandfather.
Wow.
Right down to his glasses. So
interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. I don't remember having. I mean, obviously we have dreams,
right?
But maybe ghosts communicate through dreams. Who knows? It's just so much that we don't know about spirits and ghosts. I mean,
yeah.
There's the spiritual dimension, and then there's, the physical.
Yeah,
dimension.
yeah, and beyond that, I mean, I've definitely had my moments where I felt like I wasn't alone, but I've never actually had like an encounter. Like, I mean, look, I go through for walks all the time up in Lake George Battlefield. Either before the sun comes up or after the sun goes down.
Right.
Obviously, thousands of people were killed in those. You can feel something's with you. I mean, so like I've experienced that many times, but that's the only encounter that I can remember that I ever had, and I was 2 years old.
Wow. Well, it's something that you don't ever forget about, especially when it didn't seem like anything at the time, but then you describe what you saw, and your grandma and your father freak out. It's like, oh my God, that's
yeah
that's your grandfather.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's just for 40 plus years, it's this movie has just been. I know Stephen King has noted one of the scariest things was the bouncing ball scene. Because I've never been more horrified. Nev Campbell said it's her favorite horror movie. It's the one that freaks her out the most. Mm-hmm. Martin Scorsese, it's his 11th favorite horror film of all time. So, I mean, it's just...
This is a very smart and intelligent and thought-provoking horror movie, for sure.
And again, you watch it, it seems like it's very simple, but again, there's just so many layers that bubble beneath the surface. There's so many subtle things. You got to have, I mean, the crooked politician angle was the thing at the time. Because the guy they base it on, again, I don't know much about the real story, but, Henry Treat Rogers, they say a wealthy Denver attorney was childless, but prior inhabitants of the house remain undocumented. There's just a lot of shady stuff that happened, just like Russell Hunter, George C. Scott's character, finds like a journal and everything like that. And but again, it's just like in the movie it gets resolved, but in real life it didn't sound like this got resolved at all.
Most of them don't, unfortunately.
I mean, you can find out about stuff, but a lot of times it's discovered long after these people are gone.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. All of the twisted stuff. Again, movies, I don't have a problem. I can watch any movie despite how gruesome the subject matter is or how grisly or horrifying. Mm-hmm. But when you see, when it happened in real life, it sticks with you more. It really does.
A little harder.
It hits a lot harder. And this movie, that's why I love it so much, is the fact that, okay, this is a movie, but this kind of stuff literally happened. I mean, all of the events that take place happened in real life.
Yeah.
The house just blew up in real life. How did it do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those mysteries. And you never know. You just never know where the ghosts move. And there were some books about different horror ghost stories in Colorado. And they take a picture of what they thought the mansion was, but the guy who literally saw that picture thinks that particular house in the book was like 8 blocks away. So it's
really?
You don't know what's going on. That's the thing when it comes to ghosts and spirits. The more you think you know, just like everything else in life, the more you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just like I was saying earlier, with the whole the science and the Dan Aykroyd thing, there's scientific evidence that we leave something behind when we pass away, but does that necessarily mean that it's us our spirit turning into a ghost, or is it just? I mean, we obviously are physically a ball of energy, and it's just something that's just released, and that's just it. It's so fascinating to think about.
Right.
It's
kind of scary too, in a way. And that's why we love watching horror movies, Adam, because it's one of those things where you just don't know.
Yeah.
So we're going back to the music real quick. There's some trivia on this movie. Richard Wilkins, he's the credited film composer. The music box composition, the one that, and that's another thing, like the music box stuff, it's like, okay, the music box itself in the movie was around in the early 1900s. And somehow George C. Scott, his character came up with a composition for it. How the hell did that music box get it? So that there's another little thing that makes you go, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
How did that happen?
Right.
Because did the ghost kind of reach out to him before he moved to Colorado or Seattle? The movie, it's funny. The movie takes place in Seattle, not Colorado, but the real life events took place in Colorado. I should probably have said that to be more clear. So in the movie, it's fake Seattle because it's Vancouver.
Yep.
And I mean, I think they took some exterior shots in Seattle, but it was filmed itself in
everything's
Vancouver.
filmed in Vancouver.
Right.
Jason takes Manhattan, Vancouver.
Right.
Except for 10 minutes at the end of the movie.
Well, and you take a look at, this whole Changeling concept. I mean, it's been kind of played around with in several movies, and we talked about one of them earlier was Metropolis.
Sure.
I mean, dating way back to the late 1920s, a robot, yes, but there's a doppelganger changeling thing with that.
Yep.
And of course, most recently, Us.
Yep.
I don't know. Did you see Us?
Yeah, I saw Us. Yep.
It doesn't 100% work, but it still sticks with you.
Sure.
And I think that's because of Lupita's brilliant performance. Again, we've talked about the Academy and how relevant it is. I mean, how do you not nominate her for that? I mean, she completely changed her voice and played two completely different personas.
Well, because Chris, we've talked about it because it was a horror movie.
Yeah, well, but they have flirted, but they don't call them horror movies because horror movies are not prestigious.
Exactly.
Yeah, Exorcist. That's not really a horror movie. Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, very much so.
Psycho is a horror movie. Oh, no, it's a thriller.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs is a horror movie. No, it's a thriller.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're all thrillers, but they're horror movies. Right. They're very frightening. They stay with you.
Yeah.
But it's just, see, we could go on and on about, prestigious movies and horror movies.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's so sad that some of these movies got gypped, and
yeah, for sure
they got But I mean, that's just the political structure of Hollywood. Unfortunately, it's just the way that some really good movies get overlooked for Lord knows what the Academy looks for.
Oh yeah. I mean, we could go on and on about the Academy Awards, and they get it right sometimes, but they're definitely out of touch for the most part. But so apparently there was some stories that the movie was originally rather longer, and that means, well, you got to cut some of it if it's too long.
Sure.
To me, the way the movie was perfect, but Lou Lombardo, who's billed as the supervising editor, I guess he was called in late in post-production to give the film a smoother kind of feel to it. I mean, you got like well-known actors. I mean, again, we talked about Jean Marsh, who played his wife. Mm-hmm. She's literally in like maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah,
and she gets substantial billing in there. But I guess they had a lot of stuff in the movie that they had to cut with her. There were probably some flashbacks. I mean, there's a couple flashes of her later on, and there's pictures, but
yeah,
it's like there probably had more scenes with her, but it kind of probably dragged the movie down.
Sure.
I mean, I found that interesting. Is like you think the movie's like the perfect length, but it was most likely longer than what you think it is.
Right.
Like Gangs of New York was 4 hours long, and now it's 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been a producer's call,
right?
A studio call, be like, shorten this up. No one can sit through it.
Well, a Hollywood, especially if it's a Hollywood production, you're going to have a harder time. Like Thin Red Line. Remember that World War II movie?
Yep.
6 hours long, and they whittled it down to 2 hours and 50 minutes. And I know, like George Clooney was so pissed that he had like a minute, maybe 2 minutes of screen time, but he had a lot longer scene, and there was actually some cool scenes with Mickey Rourke that were cut.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like they joke, if you survive the Terrence Malick edits, it means you're a good actor. Like Christian Bale obviously was in a couple of his movies. Oh, wow, Christian Bale's great. Oh, well, we know that.
But
anyway.
How can you shoot a 6 hour movie and not expect it to get cut down?
Right.
I mean, unless you're going to do a part 1 and part 2. I mean, like,
well, even like, remember War and Peace, that epic Russian film that was like 7.5 hours altogether. That was split into 3 parts over I think like a couple years.
Okay. Perfect.
So I mean, but people literally, I don't know how you can sit and watch one 7.5 hour movie. I mean, there is Satan Tango, the Hungarian film from 1994. That was literally one 7.5 hour long movie. I mean, there was two 20-minute intermissions. But you're literally spending.
Great, but I mean, that's
you're
your
literally spending
day.
8.5 hours. But I mean, it's a phenomenal film. It took me 3 parts. I had to watch it in 3 parts over a couple of days.
Yeah,
because it's a great film. And if I was to watch it in the movies, I'm like, okay, I better not have anything else going on that day.
You think?
I mean, if a movie is meant to be that long, I have no problem with it. But I mean, The Changeling was fine the way it was. It was
right.
It was an hour and 40 some odd minutes. It was a perfect run time. There are a lot of hour and 40-minute movies that feel like they're 3 hours, though. I mean, it's all it's not about the running time; it's what you do with it. I say that all the time. Movie could be 3.5 hours and feel like it's too short, But
if you have an incredible editor,
that
makes all the difference.
Incredible filmmaker who knows what they're doing, and you have an editor as well. That's why Scorsese is so brilliant, because he was an editor.
Yes.
And him and Thelma, his dominant editor, Raging Bull On, they both worked together on the Woodstock movie. Mm-hmm. They both edited that movie. They were part of the editing team. And Scorsese always has that editing mindset when he's doing a movie. That's why his movies, in my opinion, are so flawless, and they don't feel like they're like a 3.5 hour movie of his. It's done already. It doesn't feel that long.
Yeah. Well, but that's just an editor is the unsung hero of movie making, because I mean, let's say a director, he has his script, he has his story, and a lot of the times they're not filmed in order. They just go out and they just put it on film. Well, it's the editor's job to put the puzzle together,
right?
And so they're gonna make or break your movie.
The editor is kind of like the drummer, keeps the pace, the timing of the movie.
They definitely control it.
Yeah,
they definitely control it. Yeah,
and. Like Thelma, I don't think anyone, in my opinion, there's Spielberg had Michael Kahn for many years. That guy was a phenomenal editor too. Mm-hmm. And you had Thelma. I mean, the vibe of The Irishman. It starts off really like a very fast paced, but then it kind of she slows it down, but you don't feel it slow down. Like the last hour of The Irishman, there's very little music. It's very quiet. It builds the tension.
Yep.
And you're like, oh my God. And a good editor can, like you said, make or break a movie. And I thought the editing on The Changeling was perfect. I mean, those jump shots right at the beginning, George C. Scott seeing the truck, smash into their car, go over his wife and daughter. Again, you don't see them getting crushed. Mm-hmm. You know it just by, the way that the quick shots like that. I mean, that was editing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely it was.
Right.
100%. And so, yeah, I'll always say they're the unsung heroes of movie making because, like I said, they're the puzzle piecers. Oh,
for sure. Yeah. And we got to, I mean, cinematographers also are like, they can be the unsung heroes as well. And Dutch cinematographer John Coquelin, I think that's how you say it. I mean, I'm horrible with, these world cinema names.
Yeah. Yep.
But that, I mean, the vibe that he had in the movie, I mean, the guy, a lot of these cinematographers start off being documentary filmmakers. Mm-hmm. Same case for John as well. But I guess he also shot Witchfighter General, from what I'm seeing here.
Oh, wow.
Coquelin. I can't. I wish I could pronounce his name. Yeah. If you got a proper pronunciation for some of these names, please comment below. I don't mind being criticized. Sometimes there's proper pronunciations out there, but like this one, there's like 3 or 4 different ways you could pronounce it. So I don't know.
Right. Well, listen, you gave it your best shot, and if.
But I mean, John's he worked really fast, and he utilized natural light. He was really good at that. Witchfinder General came out several years before Barry Lyndon did. Kubrick noted for being all of Barry Lyndon, from what I understand, was shot by natural light, which is very interesting. I think it's one of the few films. There's not a lot of films even today that are filmed with natural light.
Really?
I know Alejandro Inarritu, all of The Revenant was shot with natural lighting. But I mean, there's a couple, you have to really think about it versus, all these other movies have perfect lighting. And I mean, Greg Toland is one of the finest cinematographers, and Orson Welles used him brilliantly with Citizen Kane. And you literally have Orson Welles' film, or Greg Toland was like up equal to Orson Welles. So, I mean, a great filmmaker will notice and put the spotlight on the cinematographer. I mean, Greg Toland was definitely one of those guys. But John is, he also did cinematography. Sam Peckinpah used John quite a bit before The Changeling came along. Mm-hmm. He shot Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I've heard of it.
And Chris Christopherson, the late great Chris Christopherson, playing Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
And Bob Dylan. It was interesting. Yeah. That was where Knock Knock and Heaven at His Door came from. But yeah, he was on a lot of, he shot, Straw Dogs, The Osterman Weekend, Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid, Cross of Iron. He did a lot of stuff with Sam Peckinpah, but The Changeling, again, the cinematography, like a lot of the movie, is very subtle, but it's very effective, and you don't forget about the images you see in The Changeling. So there's it takes a team to move a mountain and make a great film, and The Changeling is just one of those great films that I love to revisit from time to time. We're in the month of October; it's spooky season. Anytime is good to watch a good horror movie, right, Adam?
Absolutely.
So The Changeling, again, you can get the standard edition 4K on Second Sight, and that's the thing. You have to import it. Diabolic DVD, they're the best when it comes to importing. Orbit DVD is not bad either, but you can literally get all these imports, and you can get Severance, but the online, you gotta love the online keyboard warriors. I pay attention to these. These guys are the ones that are more nerdy about the compositions and the 4K, and they compare the 4K. And Second Sight, they say, was flawless. The Severin 4K, they said, had some issues. I went with the Second Sight 4K myself, but it doesn't really matter. The fact that you get like 2 options for 4Ks from 2 different companies shows you that this film is loved.
Yeah.
Just like, there's like 3 different 4Ks you can buy for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's great that we have these options for these classic films. Mm-hmm. Again, The Changeling didn't bomb, but it was like, okay, I think it cost like $6 million. It made $12 million, or it was like $3 million and it made $6 million. I can't remember one of the. I'm not good with numbers.
Yeah.
But it made double the amount that it cost. But it wasn't like a massive hit.
No.
But man, oh man, this movie, as the years go by, it just becomes more loved.
It certainly does.
It's just such a beloved film.
Yeah.
And again, even if you're not a horror fan, this movie is horror, but you can also define it as a drama, a suspense movie. You know?
Yeah, it definitely has a broader appeal than just to the horror genre,
right?
Horror fans,
Because my wife loves the movie and she's not into the gore.
Yeah,
and even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which didn't have a lot of gore, you can hear it.
Yeah,
and she doesn't like that. So The Changeling is a perfect movie for her. And it's perfect for you if you don't like the grisly, macabre feel. There's definitely a lot of macabre vibes. Mm-hmm. You just don't see it, other than a skeletal hand here and there. But
it's a classic ghost story.
Oh, it's a classic supernatural ghost story. And I rate it above The Haunting. I mean, again, they're two different type of supernatural films, but the spooky house vibe, I felt it more in The Changeling myself.
Sure.
But highly recommend The Changeling. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor, check it out. I mean, we didn't run through the whole plot of the movie, but it is certainly one of the greatest horror films ever made. I can't disagree with that.
Sure. Sometimes we don't have to go through the whole plot, Chris. I mean, this movie is 44 years old.
Right.
If you haven't seen it, where have you been?
Right.
But seriously, it is the classic ghost story. Like you say, it's way more broader than just horror. It's really brilliantly done, and George C. Scott is just amazing.
Oh, he's absolutely brilliant.
So definitely worth the watch, especially this time of year.
Definitely during spooky season. So what did you think of The Changeling? Not to be confused with the Clint Eastwood movie that came out in 2008. Again,
yes.
Completely different movie.
Right.
That movie is amazing in its own right, but we're talking about the 1980 classic Peter Medak's The Changeling with George C. Scott. Any way you can watch this movie, I'm sure you can find it somewhere on streaming.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I mean, this movie is so beloved. You watch it again if you haven't yet, because it's just a great film to revisit, and I highly recommend it. What do you think, though? Let us know. Comment below. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. We love to interact with you. We appreciate the people who took the time to comment and give us their thoughts. Even though they disagree with me, it was great to see different people's point of view. So comment below. Reach out to us through Facebook, Instagram, X. Our handle is @ScaredForReals.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reals.